Welcome, everyone. I'm Joe Tarnowski with ECRM, and I want to thank you all for joining us. This past year has been an interesting one for the beverage alcohol category, and the pandemic has had a huge impact on when, where, and how consumers have bought their beer, wine, and spirits. Now, some of these new behaviors may stick around as things open up, and others are going to revert back to the way that they were pre-pandemic. In today's presentation, NielsenIQ's Kaleigh Theriault is going to take a deep dive into the data to review the adult beverage category performance over the past year and explore where the category is headed. So Kaleigh, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to hand it off to you to get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And thank you for everybody who's watching us today. I'm Kaleigh Theriault, and I'm a client manager with NielsenIQ's beverage alcohol practice area. I've been with Nielsen for about 6 years now, with the past year and a half really focused on the beverage alcohol industry. Last year, we presented at ECRM on how to navigate through that next normal period and what that meant for beverage alcohol specifically. And this year's focus is really going to be on what those numbers look like a year later and how alcohol is performing in that recovery phase. So just to kind of level set us on the type of data that we're going to look at today, I want to cover what NielsenIQ looks at from a retail measurement perspective. So we can measure both that off-premise and the on-premise space. Within off-premise, specifically looking at those different channels of food, drug, mass, club, and a lot of our numbers today will include the convenience and liquor channels. We also have the ability to look at wine.com data and direct-to-consumer reporting. More of our focus, though, today for the e-commerce space will be the measurement that we have with our partnership with Rakuten. We also have the ability to look at that on-premise data with CGA, which really dives into bars and restaurants performance. But today we're going to focus on how that off-premise is performing through this recovery phase with the impacts of the shifts in on-premise and such. So signs of a split recovery. Earlier this year, we started to see a resurgence in concerts coming back. The on-premise began to open and people were returning to bars and restaurants. And we saw many articles similar to the one on the left with airlines bringing back their in-flight beverage services. But if we fast forward to where we are now, just last week, I saw an article pop up with airlines, banning alcohol on their flights until 2022. So we see kind of like this split in the recovery phase of what's kind of occurring with beverage alcohol, especially as this variant continues to spread.
And what's interesting is, we're seeing that in the restaurants too. Here in Queens, in New York City, they actually just passed a mandate that everybody who's going to dine indoors has to show proof of vaccination. So that just came out, I think, mid-August, and they're going to start enforcing it in September. So hopefully it's not a sign that we're all going to be taking a step back over the next few months.
Hopefully not, but just a couple of extra precautions there. I've seen something very similar with concerts returning. They're kind of requiring, either a negative COVID test or proof of vaccination. So hopefully just a good precaution in place. So with these signs of recovery, we're also seeing a shift in alcohol volume back to the on-premise establishments. So if we back up to where we were at the start of the pandemic in 2020, a lot of the volume that was normally present in the on-premise shifted into that off-premise as consumers started to stock up on their beverage alcohol purchasing, really for that in-home consumption. If we look back to earlier this year in the spring of 2021, we began to see the shift back to the on-premise with people returning to bars and restaurants. So we did expect to see kind of a drop in the level of sales for the off-premise as people do go out to eat and they're enjoying, their glass of wine with dinner at a bar or restaurant rather than purchasing it for that in-home consumption. So a lot of what we'll focus on not only looks at those changes versus a year ago, but also the change versus 2 years ago to really give us perspective into where the sales are and how they're still heightened compared to those historical levels.
Yeah, it's interesting how the on and off premise have kind of like blurred. The lines got blurred between them last year, where you have all of these restaurants now, they were doing delivery and they had menus that looked more like off-premise establishment. So, and now it's swinging back. So,
definitely like a blurring of a line with the e-commerce space, especially
Yes.
being able to order in that manner. Prior to the pandemic, we did see 3 really core consumer trends that were growing: convenience, experience, and wellness. Those trends accelerated during the initial stock up periods of COVID and throughout the remainder of 2020. And we're even seeing these trends very much present and growing as we, navigate through this recovery phase. So around convenience, we really see consumers purchasing that in that e-commerce space. At the beginning of the pandemic, after that initial stock up period, we saw a surge in e-commerce buyers and e-commerce orders. As the convenience of being able to order from the app on your phone and getting it delivered right to your door popped up. We're also seeing, convenience come through in different packaging styles and innovations that are being launched, especially among those ready to drink items. The convenience and portability of those seltzers and cocktails in a can really allow for consumption in places that traditionally wine and spirits wouldn't be consumed. So many of the innovations that we're seeing pop up have that convenience aspect to them. We're also seeing experience, come through with consumers really looking for that authenticity and those unique flavor offerings. Again, it's really popular within that ready to drink space as we see lemonade and tea seltzers pop up and all sorts of new flavors kind of coming to fruition there. And with that, we do see the blurring of lines between beer, wine, and spirits. So seltzers do cross all 3 categories with those different alcohol bases. So it's interesting to see them directly competing with one another, and consumers, some know the difference, some don't know the difference. So definitely a lot of blurring that's happening across categories. And then finally, wellness has been top of mind, and it's even more top of mind for consumers now that we're in this recovery phase, especially within the beverage alcohol space. Consumers are continually looking for those better for you options and the transparency on the labels. Seltzers are a great example in which you see a lot of calorie claims being called out, different sugar claims, or no added sugar claims on the can. So really those brands are wanting to show their wellness in that space. And then along with wellness, we're also seeing some pretty strong growth trends in the low alc and non-alcoholic space, which we'll get into a little bit more later on. But those are popping up more and more in competing directly with, the alcoholic beverages. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of how these trends are going to play out over the remainder of the year and into next year as well.
Well, like you said, I think the RTDs, because they cross all 3 of these areas, and it's interesting, even like restaurants that would never have thought of selling canned cocktails started getting into it last year because they had to for the delivery. Everybody was getting them. So when we're talking white tablecloth establishments, but I'm curious to see whether that will continue just because there's so much demand for it.
Definitely. So diving right into the data now, as I kind of talked about with the shifts that we're seeing between the off-premise and the on-premise, it's not surprising that off-premise alcohol growth rates did drop pretty dramatically once we hit that March of this year. As we started to lap those record-breaking pantry weeks, we saw a dramatic decline in those off-premise sales. We also know that people are returning to bars and restaurants, so we also expected to see that decline showing through in our off-premise sales. A couple of the bright spots that are popping up on this chart specifically are around the holiday time periods. So Memorial Day and Labor Day there, or Memorial Day and 4th of July, excuse me. Sales declines weren't as dramatic as they had been in the weeks leading up to that. So that'll be interesting to kind of think about as we get closer into Labor Day weekend and how beverage alcohol will lap those weeks from a year ago. Mm-hmm. So pivoting from that off-premise look and into our on-premise data, where I said we had that partnership with Rakuten, we do see that online growth is slowing in comparison to those unprecedented weeks that we had in 2020. So if we look at that far left bar at calendar year 2020, online alcohol sales were up 232% versus 2019. So the very significant growth, even more present in e-commerce than what we saw in our traditional channels. Coming into 2021, we still saw very heightened sales in January and February, up 175% versus year ago. But as we started to creep into the lapping of those record-breaking sales, even in the e-commerce space, we did start to see declines in April, May, and June, which is very, uncommon and expected given that we are lapping those weeks. But for e-commerce, to see those negative numbers is a little bit of a different story than what we have been seeing. So the biggest driver of declines there is a drop in the number of orders in the latest month specifically. So we saw orders are down almost 15% in June. So some declines are happening there. A slight decrease in the number of monthly buyers is also happening over these recent few months. Dollars per order is also down about $10. So when a consumer is going onto their app and they're going to purchase, in their e-commerce stuff and get it delivered, or going to pick it up, they're not spending as much as they were last year per order on alcohol than what they are this year.
Is this tracking both on and off premise e-commerce, like the restaurants that were doing delivery through Uber Eats or something? Or
this will specifically cover that off-premise e-commerce.
off-premise. Okay.
Yep. So whether it's, the delivery method or like a click and collect method of going to the store, yep, that's what this will cover.
Gotcha.
Okay, so looking back, flipping back over to that off-premise data with those channels we measure, and before we dive into some of those category specific trends, I do want to level set us on where we are from, weekly dollar sales perspective and how that compares over the past couple of years. So when we look at full year calendar 2020, we do see off-premise alcohol is up almost 19% versus 2019. So we saw that initial surge during those pantry loading weeks, and those sales for alcohol really maintained at a heightened level throughout the remainder of the year. So if I overlay where we're at year to date with 2019 to this slide, we still see that 2021 off-premise sales are still well above that norm from 2019. So off-premise alcohol year to date is up 18% when we look back at 2019. So like I had mentioned before, like we see a lot of declining trends when we're comparing to those huge stock up weeks of 2020, but kind of getting us back to where we were pre-pandemic, we're still well above that norm. And then breaking it down by the different categories, beer, wine, and spirits, we do see some variance across these three, and even within that core beer space. Spirits is the one category that's growing year to date versus year ago, whereas wine and beer are both seeing declines of around 3%. If we do compare those sales year to date 2021 back to 2019, though, we're seeing really strong double-digit growth across beer, wine, and spirits. So in the next few sets of slides, we're going to dive a little bit further into what some of the drivers are from a segment perspective in each one of these categories. And I'll be sure to show the difference and how it looks versus year ago and 2 years ago to really give us that full picture of what is happening in the off-premise. So looking at spirits and breaking it down by categories, we do see prepared cocktails, which includes those ready-to-drink spirits-based ready-to-drink options, and tequila driving a lot of growth when we compare it back to versus 2 years ago. Prepared cocktails are up triple digits, and tequila is not far behind. We also see some strong growth numbers versus 2 years ago in a lot of the whiskey offerings, Japanese whiskey, American whiskey, and Scotch. But I think what's really moving the needle here within spirits is if we take a look at that share change at the bottom, and we can call out here that the combination of prepared cocktails and tequila together are gaining almost 3 points of share within that spirit space in the off-premise. And it's really taking that share from, our more traditional alcohols of gin, vodka, rum, what we would expect to see. So some changes are happening among spirits even within this off-premise space.
Is this more of a convenience thing? The prepared cocktails?
Prepared cocktails is definitely
Yeah.
hitting on that convenience, the experience, and even, I mean, it's so convenient to have your cocktail in a can and open it up and take it with you to a
Mhm.
park, to the beach, where you wouldn't normally consume a cocktail, that
Yeah.
spirits-based cocktail.
And actually, that's a good point because, for so long, we were limited just to outdoor type stuff.
Mhm.
And, so a lot of people were going to the beach or the parks because they wanted to avoid crowds. And these things are perfectly suited for that.
Yeah, definitely. And as things start to open back up, I think you touched on it a little bit earlier with, canned cocktails even making their way into bars and restaurants. I think it will be a little more popular there just with the convenience of it and the safety of a can.
Mhm.
Um, and I think they'll even be a little more um, accessible when you go to concerts and as things start to open back up in that way too, and events start to happen. I think prepared cocktails will continue to pop up.
Yeah, it's just made for it. It's perfect for that.
Hmm. Definitely. So taking a look at spirits price tiers, we do see some varied trends in the value versus, the higher end price tiers. We're really noticing that those high end price tiers and premiumization is continuing to drive growth within spirits. So that ultra price tier is up 103% compared to 2019. And then what's also interesting is that the combination of super premium and ultra together have gained over 6 points of share in the past 2 years of spirits. So consumers were really opting for those premium options when they were purchasing for that in-home consumption. And we're still seeing that trend sort of continue through this recovery phase.
Yeah, and we've seen that on the food side too. The fact that because people were home more and they're not spending their money eating out, when they did buy something for the home, they kind of went up another level, another notch in quality and price
Yeah,
because it
they
was still
leveled up.
cheaper than buying it outside,
Mhm.
in a restaurant.
Yep. So I think that's a trend we'll like hit on towards the end too of will it continue?
Mhm.
It'll be interesting to see what happens there. And then with wine, when we break down that total wine space by table versus sparkling, we're really seeing sparkling wine driving the growth through the recovery phase for wine. Within table wine, we can break it down by red, white, and pink, and we're seeing similar declines across all of those versus year ago. But it is good to still remember that when we compare the numbers for table wine versus that 2 year ago, that more normalized pre-pandemic period, they're still growing pretty strong. Most of them are up double digits. So still really strong growth, even though those trends versus year ago might not look as great. And then within table wine specifically, breaking that down into price tiers, seeing what's really driving, the declines in the growth here, similar to what we saw with spirits, premiumization is really accelerating within wine as well. So what you were just talking about of
Mhm.
consumers are kind of leveling up when they're going to the store since they weren't buying, in the off or in the on premise. So those lower price tiers below $11 are kind of losing some of that share within wine, but we're seeing those higher price tiers, $15 and up, really accelerating their growth as we work through this recovery phase.
Mhm.
And then to kind of summarize it all up here within wine, premiumization did really accelerate in most channels. So like I just mentioned, wines that are priced $15 and up have gained almost 2 points of share within total wine, with that $25 and up bottle having the largest gains, the strongest gains. One thing to know, I did mention like our direct to consumer measurement. That is one channel where we're not seeing the premiumization trend come through as much, with the average price of the wines that are being purchased declining by about $6 in April of this year compared to previous years. So premiumization is present in most of the channels that we see, but direct to consumer is a different story there.
It's interesting. That's interesting. I wonder why that's happening. Yeah.
It is interesting. I think direct to consumer historically has always been those higher priced wines.
Mhm.
And so I think as more, wineries enter into direct to consumer,
Mhm.
it's some of the smaller ones that might have
Yeah.
those bottles that are priced a little bit cheaper as well. So we're just kind of seeing a shift there and what's actually being sold.
Gotcha.
And then we are seeing sparkling outpacing the growth of table wine. So year to date, table wine is up 10% versus 2019, while sparkling is up 47%. So a big disparity there in the growth rates, and much stronger growth among that sparkling segment. Within sparkling specifically, we do see French champagne really leading the growth there, up 88% versus 2 years ago. So very strong growth in the sparkling space. And then breaking down table wine by the different varietals, we do see our traditional varietals, Sauvignon Blanc, Rosé, our red blends, Pinot Noirs, and the Cabs. They were among the strongest growth varietals during that COVID 2020 period. And they're all up double digits when we look at them today versus that 2019 period. So very strong growth there. And then one segment that we didn't really touch on in a couple of these slides, but it's really important to call out, especially as we talk about ready to drinks. Those wine-based cocktails are showing very significant growth year to date versus a year ago, up 58%. So that the convenience and wellness trends are still very present among this wine space as well.
So, it's cool. It's like champagne is no longer just for celebrations. It seems it's like moving into like a regular everyday kind of thing.
It definitely is. And I think it's sort of shifting its way into a lot of those ready to drink options as well. Yeah. Both table wine and sparkling wine are, but that gives it a leg up because you no longer have to open a bottle and finish it as fast, I guess, as you would, a table wine bottle. So
that's a good point, actually. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then jumping into beer. We continue to see a surge in hard seltzers. They're up 287% year to date versus 2 years ago. So really significant growth there. And then other beyond beer segments are also popping up as our top growers. Hard tea is called out on this slide. And both of these segments really catering again to the convenience and the experience aspect. And we'll see more coming through in innovations and flavors around these segments as well. And then on the same note, touching on those core consumer trends, the non-alc beer segment is growing double digits as well versus 2 years ago. And it's actually outpacing, it's really interesting that it's actually outpacing the growth year to date versus a year ago when we compare it to hard seltzers. So it's growing faster there. It's on a smaller base, but we do see really strong growth rates in that non-alc space.
There's so many new things coming out in that space. And it seems like they're getting a little cooler, a little more on trend with their marketing, and it's just having so much more variety. It's probably having some impact in there.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, some of the more traditional beer brands are bringing out their non-alcoholic option, which is something new and cool to try. And then we also see strong innovations coming in from wine and spirits too in that non-alc space. Breaking down those hard seltzer dollar sales at the weekly level. Prior to the 4th of July, we saw weekly dollar sales surpassing every week through the summer compared to 2020, which is really significant to show. In recent weeks, it has dropped down a little bit below, but still much greater than what we were seeing historically in 2019. So the growth is slowing here, but seltzers are definitely still making that impact within the beer FMB cider space. And to show a couple of more points and showing their strength, that growth is slowing, but still up double digits. So it's up 18.7% in the off-premise year to date versus year ago. And that really translates into how it's doing share performance-wise within beer as well. So I remember earlier last year, there was speculation around, can seltzers achieve a 10% share of total beer FMB cider? And we saw a number of articles around that. It did hit that 10% share around some of the key holidays and early in the stock up phases, but it did vary over the remainder of the year. Year to date, though, so far in 2021, we do see it maintaining above that 10% share at 10.1%, which is up almost 2 points from year to date year ago. So it's definitely hit that $10 share mark, and I think we'll continue to see that share grow as we see those lines blur.
So that officially makes it a thing. It's a trend now.
I think there's a number of points that we have here to show that it's a trend. It's here to stay for sure. And then The last point there, so 19% of new items within that seltzer space, or of items within the seltzer space are new items. And they're really capturing more than their fair share. So they're 19% of the number of items, but they're capturing 23% of the dollar sales. So innovation, flavor innovations, new brands that are popping up are starting, making an impact within the dollar sales for hard seltzers. But I do want to call out here that we do see contribution from new items, but when it comes to our established items, when we look at those, and we look at the top 10 items within seltzer, 7 of the top 10 items are established White Claw and Truly items. So our established items are still very important to the category, but innovation is also another facet of that. Which kind of leads us into our brand conversation around hard seltzers. So if we take a look into that lens, year to date 2019, we saw White Claw and Truly in the top 2 spots. They held an 82% dollar share combined of hard seltzers, so capturing the vast majority of sales there. And then we see, the other tail end of the other 8 on the top of the slide. When we compare those top 10 to year to date 2021, we're only seeing 3 of those same brands come through. So although, seltzers are a large space and they're fairly established at this point, newer brands are still able to make an impact with the right strategies in place. I do want to call out here that White Claw and Truly still in those top 2 spots, but their share of hard seltzers has shrunk a bit and dropped to 66% of total hard seltzers. So those new brands, new innovation items can definitely make an impact in this space. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with flavors and kind of the blurring of the lines as well.
Yeah, and what's cool is what you notice when you look at these images of the cans is they're very Instagram friendly. Like they lend themselves, you don't see people posing with like other types of drinks the way they've been posing with White Claw and Truly and all of these. So, they just, the design aspects kind of lend themselves to more of that social media sharing.
Yeah, definitely. Huge social impact. And like you said, they look nice in the can and they're a slimmer can and stuff. So it kind of feels like a healthier drink and definitely more fun than the traditional beer FMB cider space.
Mm-hmm.
We do see emerging seltzer flavors popping up, and I touched on them a little bit, those lemonade seltzers, the hard tea seltzers, and ranch water seltzers. And they're new flavors and new styles, and they are seeing sizable sales. So lemonade seltzers are up 125% versus year ago, so year to date. And we see that many of our top brands have dipped into this flavor profile. So they have their traditional variety pack, and then they're starting to launch, a lemonade variety pack. We see that across a number of different brands. Hard tea seltzers are less common and newer to the space versus year ago, but a couple of brands have led there, and it wouldn't be unexpected to see other brands following suit with that tea flavoring. And then ranch water seltzers, also very new versus year ago, smaller than both lemonade and hard tea, but still making an impact within this space. So we kind of talked about, the 10% share and are they here to stay? If the 10% share wasn't convincing enough, we do have some consumer metrics to kind of back up the strength of seltzers here and that strong buyer behavior. So over the past year, we have seen an increase in seltzer buyers, and they're up 25% in the latest 52 weeks versus a year ago. So continually adding new buyers to that space and increasing penetration of that legal drinking age. We also see very strong retention of seltzer buyers, with over 58% of them coming back to purchase, 2 or more times again throughout the year. So I took a look at, is it different flavors and different brands? I didn't dive too much into the different brands, but within a brand, we do see consumers entering on a variety pack. And then from there, they're more likely to repeat their purchasing on a specific flavor, but very strong purchasing initially and in that repeat retention side of things. One more thing I wanted to call out here, we do see purchase sizes are also up for, so like the dollar spent per buyer is growing, the size of a purchase for hard seltzers is getting stronger. It's up $11 per buyer, which is driven by more trips, spending more. I think that 24 packs that are being introduced, those are more accessible across many brands. So they're spending a little bit more per trip because they're buying the 24 pack instead of a couple of, their single 12 pack variety. And then I think consumers are in this space are definitely trying new things. So when they see that new innovation pop up, they're grabbing the traditional variety pack that they know and they like. And then they're also going to probably purchase, that new innovation item that's popping up. So their purchase sizes are growing there.
I think the pandemic actually really helped the sales of these, because I know that when indoor dining wasn't allowed and the restaurants were doing the outdoor dining last summer, you had a lot of these hard seltzers were doing promotions. So they'd have like a bucket of 4 for $25. And I think the restaurants really like them because of safety issues, right? They're not touching or making drinks, whatever. You could just give them the cans and that's it. And I think a lot of people, certainly myself, got exposed to more of these during that time than they normally would have otherwise. And then it just kind of spilled over into the off premise.
Definitely. There's like less hands that need to be crossed when serving a can versus that traditional cocktail. You don't have a bartender and the waitress and all of that. So definitely that safety aspect of it really drove some too. Oh. Expanding our lens from just those malt-based hard seltzers into the broader ready-to-drink definition. So NielsenIQ does look at ready-to-drinks across beer, wine, and spirits. We cover off on, all malt-based hard seltzers, wine-based seltzers, spirits-based seltzers. We include FMBs in this definition. Those beyond beer segments like hard tea, hard kombucha are included. We also include those canned cocktails that are spirits-based, and then some wine-based cocktails in the smaller package canned formats, Tetra Pak formats of wine as well. So within this ready to drink space, we really see strong dollar sales growth versus a year ago, up 14%. And the year to date so far, they're almost $6 billion. So a very large category that many brands are playing in, and those lines are blurring for sure across beer, wine, and spirits. And ready to drink options, like we've talked about, they really touch on those core consumer trends that we looked at earlier in the deck around convenience, experience, wellness. Definitely ready to drinks are definitely playing to each one of those. And if we break down ready to drinks by their alcohol base, we do see some interesting things happening here with spirits-based seltzers and spirits cocktails really leading growth across ready to drinks, up triple digits. The other segments within ready to drinks aren't growing as fast, and we're seeing some declines in those traditional FMBs and wine seltzers. So within ready to drinks, we're seeing a ton of growth, but there is some share shifting happening. 2 years ago, when we looked at these numbers in 2019, spirits-based cocktails, like spirits ready to drinks, were rather small and only had a 2.6% share of ready to drinks. But when we look at that number in the latest week, it's almost tripled, and it's up to like 7%. So still rather small within that ready to drink space, but making an impact and showing really significant growth here. Hard seltzers, on the other hand, account for almost half of dollar sales within ready to drinks. Not too surprising. They're very established. A lot is going on there, but they are continuing to grow share within that. So a couple of years ago, they were only 48%, and now they're up to that 50% mark. So really interesting things happening even within ready to drinks.
I think the quality has gotten so good, especially like the ready to drink cocktails, that people are like, you know what? I don't have to make this at home myself. It's good enough. It's so good that I could just take the convenience of it and enjoy.
Definitely. That authenticity is like really there with a lot of those canned cocktails where they're very realistic. And even when we look at the different alcohol bases, we do see something like a ranch water seltzer is typically tequila and water and a bit of lime, but we're seeing that in the malt-based space, but it has that flavor similar to what you would get with your traditional tequila. And then we're seeing those ranch water seltzers, obviously, with the spirits base as well, but really blurring the lines across those cocktails and entering into the different alcohol bases.
Yeah.
So when we looked at that beer segment slide, we really saw non-alc hitting that wellness pillar and showing a lot of growth within the beer space. Beer non-alcoholics are the most popular. They're the largest within non-alc, but we see a number of new innovations coming in wine and spirits. So all in total, non-alcoholic beer, wine, and spirits are up 35% versus a year ago. So really strong growth, and probably even stronger if we compare back to that 2019 period. Non-alc is still relatively small, around 323 million in the off-premise for the latest year, but those new entrants really driving growth there, and there's a lot of opportunity, especially with consumers turning to that wellness and those better for you options and safer options as well.
Yeah, and you can see they're ramping up their packaging as well.
Definitely. And lots of options for consumers here as well. Traditionally, it was, your non-alcoholic beer, but now other brands are playing into that space, and we even see non-alcoholic craft beers popping up. So we're usually into the higher ABV values for beer, but those non-alc options really give some great alternatives.
Something for everybody.
And then finally, our e-commerce section here. Again, through our partnership with Rakuten, we did see a lot of interesting things happening with the data reflecting what we were seeing with the off-premise data. So that initial surge in the stock up phase, we saw huge spikes in dollar sales for e-commerce across alcohol. And it was really that convenient, stress-free shopping environment. You didn't have to go out to the store and kind of be in that communal space. It was safe to order at home and get it delivered to your door, or to go in and pick up without having to interact with other people during that initial stock up phase. We did see heightened e-commerce sales throughout the remainder of 2020 and into those year-end holidays. We saw another spike. As we kind of creep into 2021 with this data, year to date, we start to see some declines in sales, with total alcohol down 5.4% in that e-commerce space. And that's really driven by wine and spirits called out here on the slide. Whereas beer and FMBs are seeing pretty strong growth year to date in the e-commerce space. So definitely a little more easy to access beer and FMBs than it was a couple of years ago. So some shifts in dynamics from what we're used to seeing with e-commerce. So with the effects of beer and FMBs growing, it's an effect that's flowing through into their share of online alcohol e-commerce sales. Combined, they've gained almost 2.5 points within that total alcohol space, and stealing that, from wine and spirits, since those are declining. A couple of years ago, we saw wine closer to a 70% share of that online alcohol space, and that's continued to decline as spirits and beer and FMBs enter into that e-commerce space and get out there on the e-commerce platforms. And I think that, the delivery services, with Drizzly and such, have really made beer and spirits more accessible than our traditional, wine delivery.
Yeah, everybody stepped up their game on the e-commerce side. They had to over the past year, and
definitely, yeah. If you didn't, you fell behind a little bit in that space. So really relevant, especially in the big cities, like for you in New York City. Like delivery is even more heightened than it is for me in the Midwest.
Yep.
Typically with e-commerce buyers, so looking at a buyer trend here instead of those dollars, typically we see those spikes around year-on holidays, Christmas and New Year's. But with the start of the pandemic, during that stock up phase, we saw a surge of new buyers purchasing alcohol online, like more than doubling what they were the previous months. So that trend of those monthly buyers, purchasing in the e-commerce space did continue throughout the remainder of 2020. And then we did see that holiday spike again in December. And then buyers have sort of leveled off at the beginning of this year, in line with what we saw last year. So buyers are up. If we look at that total year-to-date period, buyers have increased 1.5% versus what we saw with that year-to-date time period year ago. Behind this data, I did take a look into who might be driving that from a buyer perspective. Not surprising, we do see growth across all buying groups. What was interesting to me when I looked into it is that the younger legal drinking ages 21 to 24, they're a very small set of consumers that are purchasing online. But when we look at the share of new buyers and how they're distributed, we see that group growing within this e-commerce alcohol space. So that was pretty interesting to see that those younger ages are using that e-commerce platform. I also noticed that Hispanic ethnicities are growing their footprint within the alcohol e-commerce buyer set. So there's really some opportunities to target there. When we think about innovations that could be launched and different flavor options, be sure to think about, companies need to think about what their online shelf looks like and who they're catering to in that online space.
I think long term, it's safe to say that it's just going to keep going up and up and up. It may not, be sharp all the time, but it's just the convenience. They're getting the retailers are getting so much better at it. Everybody's just so used to doing it that it's just there's no way it's not going to just keep going up steady.
Definitely. And then historically, we've seen, you order something online, it takes a few days to get there, but I feel like that same day delivery is really ramping up too. And like you said, companies are getting much better at it, which kind of leads us into the next slide. Around every other year, Nielsen puts out a category shopping fundamentals specifically to Beverage and looks at how consumers are purchasing beer, wine, and spirits, in the off-premise, and then also how they're purchasing online and how that dynamic works. And we're seeing that more and more online orders are often for that same day consumption because the accessibility of being able to get it delivered the same day is becoming more and more popular. So 58% of online wine purchases are stated to be consumed same day. That number increases to 64% with online beer purchases, and then is highest with spirits. About 2/3 of spirits purchases are stated to be for same day consumption.
Well, we're becoming e-commerce snobs. Like it's got to be same day. Soon, same day is going to be just table stakes because we're so used to it. Everything is moved to 2-day, and if like one of your deliveries is late by a day, like people end up getting mad now. And it's just, but like I said, we've become snobs as far as e-commerce delivery. We're right now.
I will say, I feel like a lot of consumers are snobs, and if they can't get it the same day, then they don't purchase in the e-commerce space. So we are from an era where we want it now. So same day delivery options are really making that easier and easier. And then really to touch on what we kind of expect to see for the remainder of 2021 and how all of these trends fit together. Prepared drinks and those ready to drink options, that momentum is likely going to continue through the remainder of the summer and especially into Labor Day. And we'll likely see that sales really surpass what we saw last summer with all the new options that are out there and the new buyers that are coming into this ready to drink space. There is an opportunity likely within the on-premise space, like we talked about, being able to open a can and having it be that safer option really gives on-premise some opportunities to capitalize there. And then the other thing I think we didn't talk about as much, but it is important to know that with those canned cocktails, you know what you're getting too. If you've had one, you know what you're going to get from restaurant to restaurant, where sometimes, mixed drinks and mixed cocktails can vary a little bit. So I think consumers also know what they're going to get when they do purchase those canned and ready to drink options.
That's a good point.
And then additionally, through the remainder of the year, that we do want to highlight that there are some opportunities for spirits and wine based cocktails to hit home with consumers during those winter holidays. So maybe introducing some winter cocktails and some holiday themed cocktails could be a potential opportunity for them there. Premiumization. So within wine and spirits, we did see growth among those highest end price tiers, and we'll expect that to continue. It has continued through this recovery phase, especially when we look at 2 years ago. However, it will likely begin to slow as people return back to those on-premise spaces. They'll probably level back down to what they were purchasing since they are going out to dinner, and they might be purchasing their bottle of wine there and spending a little bit more money in the on-premise. So I think there will be some shifts that we're going to start to see and some slowing of that premiumization trend. And then with e-commerce, we do see it beginning to slow, a couple of declines in the latest months, but like we talked about, e-commerce is going to still be a very present trend within beverage alcohol and an important space for, all manufacturers to think about. There's a unique set of consumers there that want to purchase and they want that same day delivery. So definitely important to understand. how consumers are shopping online, identifying those purchase motivators by channel and by fulfillment type. So there are different triggers if somebody wants to do click and collect versus delivery. And then in the past, when we've looked at different e-tailers, so some of those large e-commerce retailers, we do see a difference in what they are shelving. So when you think about your e-commerce strategy, keeping in mind that each e-commerce retailer and the different methods will have differing strategies. It won't just be one cohesive strategy. Clear product descriptions are also really recommended, especially as consumers are only able to see so much online and not view the whole package and feel the product and such. It'll be important to call out, whether it's low alc or non-alc, making it really easy for consumers to search for those options and be able to purchase online.
Yeah, digital is so important. I mean, especially one thing I've been hearing over and over again in speaking with buyers across categories is that consumers are far more educated about what's going into their products and what's going in and on their bodies than ever before. And a lot of that was, driven by being home all the time. They had more time to explore. So definitely, that beginning of the consumer journey is a lot more exploration and learning than before.
Yeah, and health and wellness is another thing to call out on the packages and highlighting that in the e-commerce space too. And later this year, we're going to be digging into health and wellness a little bit more at NielsenIQ as we get some interesting insights with our partnership with Label Insights. So it'll be really exciting to see how health and wellness is growing within the alcohol space and how it might be different from, those traditional food categories. So e-commerce is definitely important to keep in mind, especially as we see the shifts from on to off premise. I think there's definitely an e-commerce presence that's going to be maintained. And with the Delta variant that is continuing to spread, it's not unlikely that we could see another surge in these online alcohol sales, especially as we get closer to those year-end holidays. And
Excellent.
that is what we had for slides.
Well, I mean, look, it looks like regardless of what direction the pandemic takes, I think it looks like there's plenty of opportunities for retailers and brands. So thank you again for all the great insights. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. And then we will make sure to share the slides with everybody too.
Definitely. Thank you, Joe. And thank you for having NielsenIQ at ECRM this year.
Our pleasure.